They cut my hours first. Then they cut my name off the schedule, like I'd never worked a single shift at that hotel. Then, in front of a lobby full of strangers, a 34-year-old manager told me I was the kind of employee this place didn't need anymore. He said it loud. He wanted people to hear. I didn't answer him. I picked up my cart, I finished my floor, and 3 days later, a 4-star general walked through that same lobby, stopped mid-stride, and saluted me. Nobody laughed after that, not one person. But before the general, there was a coffee stain on white marble, and a boy who thought a title made him a man. Let me take you back to the morning it started. My name is Dorothy Jean Vance. I am 64 years old. For 11 years, I have cleaned the lobby, the hallways, and the banquet rooms of the Ashworth Grand Hotel. It sits on Jefferson Street in Roanoke, Virginia. Before that, I spent 22 years in the United States Army. I retired a master sergeant. Nobody at that hotel knew it. I never told them. I didn't think it was anyone's business what I used to be, only what I could still do. It was 4 in the morning when Craig Hensley found the stain. He'd been general manager for 6 weeks. Corporate sent him down from a chain hotel in Charlotte, some regional promotion. From the first day he walked those halls like he was already unhappy with what he'd inherited. He was 34. He had a laminated badge that said General Manager in letters too big for the job. He had a way of talking to people that made it clear he thought volume was the same thing as authority. Dorothy. He said my name like it tasted bad. Come here. I set my cart against the wall and walked over. The lobby was empty except for Ronnie, the night porter, half asleep behind the desk. 4 in the morning, the marble floor throwing back the light from the chandelier. Nobody around to see anything except him and me and a tired kid who wanted his shift to end. Hensley pointed at a coffee stain the size of a $50 near the base of a column. This has been here since I walked through at midnight. I'll get it now, I said. That's not the point. He crossed his arms. The point is, I shouldn't have had to see it at all. You're the overnight cleaner. This is what you do. This is the only thing you do. I didn't say anything. 22 years teaches you that silence costs nothing. It buys you everything. He kept going. Men like Hensley need an audience, even one half-asleep porter and one 64-year-old woman holding a spray bottle. Honestly, he said, I don't know why they still have you on nights. You're slow, you're set in your ways. This hotel needs people who can keep up, not people counting down to retirement. He looked at Ronnie like he wanted a witness. You're the kind of employee this place doesn't need anymore. I mean that. Ronnie's eyes dropped to the desk. He didn't want to be part of it. I didn't blame him. I looked at the stain, not at Hensley. I'll have it up in 2 minutes, I said. That was all. I didn't raise my voice. I never needed to. He walked off toward the elevator, satisfied with himself. The particular way of a young man who has just confirmed, to his own ear, that he is in charge. I knelt down. I sprayed the marble. I worked the stain out in 90 seconds, same as I could have told him before he even opened his mouth. An hour later, the banquet hall doors jammed. 2 of the younger day shift staff, a boy named Marcus and a girl named Priya, stood in front of the double doors, pushing and pulling, getting nowhere, murmuring about calling maintenance, losing 20 minutes before the breakfast setup crew could get in. I walked past with my cart. I looked at the hinge mechanism for 2 seconds. I reached under the release bar and popped it clean. The doors swung open like they'd never stuck at all. How did you do that? Marcus said. Not really a question. More of a confused kind of wonder. You just have to know where it's built to give, I said, and kept walking. Priya watched me go a little longer than Marcus did. She was the only one on that whole staff who ever looked at me like I was a person and not a fixture. She brought me coffee sometimes on the coldest nights. She'd asked me once, months back, if I had family. When I said my husband passed 9 years ago, she never pushed further. She just said she was sorry and meant it. She used to say I never talked about my life before the hotel, like it was some closed door she respected without needing to open. She didn't know how right she was. Under my smock, zipped into an inner pocket I sewed myself years ago, I carried two things: my retired Master Sergeant identification card, laminated, a little worn at the corners, and a folded citation for a Bronze Star, earned in 2003 during a supply convoy ambush outside a city whose name I don't say out loud anymore. I patted that pocket most mornings before I started my shift. An old habit, the same motion soldiers make checking for dog tags that already left their necks decades ago. Nobody asked me why I did it. Nobody ever asked me anything real. My husband, Michael Vance, was a staff sergeant. We served in different units, but we married anyway. The way people do when the army becomes the only world you know, and you find someone who understands it without explanation. He was in that same convoy. He carried the wounds from it for 6 more years. Then they finally took him from me, quiet, in a hospital bed in Roanoke, 9 years back this coming spring. Before he went, he wrote me a letter. Short, half a page in handwriting that had started to shake by then. I kept it folded behind the citation, in the same pocket against my chest, every single day since. I never told anyone at the Ashworth Grand any of that. Not Priya, not Ronnie, not the day manager before Hensley, a good, tired man named Walsh who never once made me feel small. I cleaned floors because after Michael died, I needed work that let my hands stay busy and my mind stay quiet. 11 years in, I had come to actually love that hotel. The marble under the chandelier, the old brass elevator doors that still worked if you knew to lift the handle a half-inch before you pulled. The way the building held its history in its walls even while the ownership kept changing around it. Twice a year, the Army Reunion Association booked the banquet hall for their veterans' dinner. I always requested those shifts. I liked being near it, even from the edges, even unseen. Hensley didn't know any of that either when he called me the kind of employee the hotel didn't need. He found me again 2 nights later. This time he had a clipboard. "We're doing performance reviews," he said. "Yours is Thursday morning, 9 o'clock. "All right," I said. "I want to be straightforward with you, Dorothy. There have been some complaints." He didn't say from who. He didn't say what. He held the clipboard like it was evidence of something, though I never saw a single page of it. "I think it's time we talk about whether this role is still the right fit." I looked at him for a moment. 22 years of standing at parade rest teaches your face not to move, even when your chest tightens. "I understand," I said. He seemed almost disappointed that I didn't argue. Men like Hensley want a fight they can win in front of witnesses. I didn't give him one. I picked my cart back up and finished the east hallway, floor by floor, the way I had finished every hallway for 11 years. Whether anyone was watching or not, that Thursday review sat on the calendar like a stone in my shoe. I didn't know yet that it would land on the exact same morning as the Army Reunion Association's banquet, the one weekend a year that filled the Ashworth Grand's lobby with men and women who still stood a certain way when a flag came into the room. I didn't know a 4-star general was already on his way to Roanoke. I didn't know that somewhere in a regional office 2 states over, a woman named Renata Cole had already opened a file with Craig Hensley's name at the top of it. 2 separate guest complaints stapled inside. She was already asking her assistant to book a flight. All I knew, that Thursday morning 3 days out, was that a 34-year-old man in a badge too big for him had decided I was disposable, and that I had a citation in my pocket that said otherwise, folded so many times the creases had gone soft as cloth. I finished my shift. I clocked out. I drove home in the dark the way I always did, past the Roanoke Star lit up on the mountain, past the diner where Michael used to take me on Sunday mornings before his hands stopped working right. I let myself into a quiet house that had been quiet for 9 years. I sat at the kitchen table. I took the citation out of my pocket. I read it again, though I had it memorized word for word. For heroism in connection with military operations against an armed enemy of the United States. I folded it back along its soft creases. I put it back against my chest. I went to bed. In the morning, there was a floor to clean, whether the man cleaning it thought he saw me or not. He didn't see me yet. Nobody at that hotel had ever really seen me. That was about to change. Not the way any of us expected. Not because of anything I said. Priya found me the next evening restocking the linen closet on the third floor. Near a locked utility room, I keep the key to myself. A small space I use once a year to change out of my work clothes before I walk the long way home past the old Veterans Memorial downtown. She leaned in the doorway, arms crossed, worry written plain across her face. "He's really going to fire you Thursday," she said, not a question. "Maybe," I said. "That's not fair, Dorothy. You've been here longer than anyone. You fixed that door in 2 seconds. He can't even find the breaker panel." I almost smiled. "It's not about fair, sweetheart. It's about what he needs to look like to the people above him." She didn't understand that yet. She was 26. She still believed, in the deep, unspoken way the young believe things, that decency gets noticed on its own, that you don't have to wait for someone else to say your name out loud before the room finally turns and looks at you. I used to believe that too, a long time ago, before 22 years taught me otherwise. "You never talk about your life before here," she said, softer now. "I've always wondered." "Someday," I told her, "you'll understand why some of us carry things quietly." She let it go, the way she always did, and helped me finish the linens. Neither of us knew that in 72 hours, the whole hotel would hear my old rank spoken out loud in the middle of that marble lobby. That a man who had commanded thousands would stop walking and come to attention in front of a coffee stain that no longer existed. And a manager who had never once asked me a single real question about who I used to be. The Ashworth Grand had a rhythm I'd learned the way you learn a hymn, without ever meaning to memorize it. Overnight deliveries came in through the loading dock at 1. The ice machines on 4 and 7 cycled loud enough to hear from the stairwell at 2. By 3, the last of the bar crowd cleared out of the lounge, and I could work the lobby floor in peace, buffing the marble under the chandelier until it threw the light back clean. I liked that hour best. 3 in the morning in a grand old hotel is its own kind of church, quiet and cavernous. I have always done my best praying with a mop in my hand. Craig Hensley did not understand that hour, because Craig Hensley had never worked it. He'd come up through front-of-house roles at daytime properties, conference centers, a resort with a water park, places where the guest-facing hours were the only hours that counted, and the overnight staff were a line item he'd never had to meet. When corporate handed him the Ashworth Grand, he inherited a building with bones older than he was, and a night crew that had kept it standing through 3 ownership changes. He treated both like inconveniences he intended to modernize away. The 2 guest complaints that started it all had nothing to do with me. I want to be plain about that, because for a while, even I wondered if I was the cause. The first was a corporate guest from Pittsburgh who complained about slow valet service on a Tuesday. when Hensley had cut the overnight bell staff from 2 to 1 to save on payroll. The second was a wedding party that found their block of rooms double booked because Hensley had approved a software change without training the front desk on it. Both complaints climbed the chain to a regional office in Charlotte. Both landed on the desk of a woman named Renata Cole. Both had Craig Hensley's decisions written all over them, though he would spend the next 2 weeks making sure that wasn't the story anyone told. I didn't know any of that yet. All I knew was that the reviews started coming for the night crew first, the cheapest, quietest targets in the building, and that I was the longest tenured name on that list. Thursday's review notice went up on the break room corkboard Tuesday afternoon. My name typed in the same size font as everyone else's, as if 11 years and 2 decades before that weighed the same as 6 weeks. I read it standing beside the vending machine. I felt something old and familiar settle over me. The specific stillness a person learns when they've been underestimated by people with more rank and less sense before. I'd felt it the first time a lieutenant 20 years my junior tried to explain supply logistics to me, like I hadn't run convoys through worse roads than he'd ever driven. I'd felt it every promotion board where a man who'd never carried a wounded soldier out of a kill zone sat across a table deciding whether I understood leadership. The Army teaches you, if you let it, that being underestimated is not an injury. It is simply information about the person doing the underestimating. Priya found the notice too, later that same afternoon. She was angrier about it than I was. "This is insane," she said, jabbing a finger at the corkboard. "Insane, Dorothy. You've never had a single complaint in 11 years. I've asked Denise in HR. There's nothing in your file. Nothing. There will be by Thursday," I said. Men like Hensley write the file they need after they've already made the decision. That's not legal. No, I agreed. It isn't. But it's common. And common usually wins before legal gets a chance to. She stood there a moment longer, arms crossed, jaw tight. 26 years old and furious on my behalf, in a way I found almost funny, in the gentlest sense of the word. I had not seen anyone that angry about an injustice done to me since Michael. Michael had been gone 9 years. I had forgotten, a little, what it felt like to have someone else carry a piece of your outrage so you didn't have to carry all of it alone. "I'm going to talk to him," she said. "Don't." I said it firm enough that she looked up. "You'll cost yourself something and it won't change a thing. Let it play out." She didn't like that answer. She helped me finish the linen count anyway, quiet now. Before she left for the night, she squeezed my hand once, hard, the way you'd squeeze the hand of someone headed into surgery. The Army Reunion Association's fall banquet was booked for Friday night, the day after my review, in the Ashworth Grand's largest hall. The one with the jammed doors I'd freed with 2 fingers under a release bar the younger staff couldn't find. 210 guests confirmed. A color guard. A keynote speaker, whose name I recognized the moment I saw it typed on the banquet order sheet taped to the service hallway wall. General Walter Briggs, United States Army, retired. 4 stars. Keynote remarks, 7:30 p.m., followed by dinner. I stood in that hallway a long moment with a stack of folded tablecloths in my arms, reading his name. Something in my chest did a thing I hadn't let it do in years. I had never met Walter Briggs personally. Not directly. Not in the sense of a handshake or an assignment together. But I knew him the way soldiers know certain names. The way you know a man's reputation has outrun his rank. I had served under 2 of his former staff officers. His name had come up once, quietly, in the paperwork surrounding the very citation folded in my pocket. A signature 2 levels up the chain from the officer who'd actually written the recommendation. I hadn't thought about that citation's chain of approval in years. I thought about it now, standing in a service hallway with an armful of linen. I patted my chest pocket out of the old habit. I told myself it didn't matter. He wouldn't remember a name on a piece of paper he'd signed among hundreds. Back when I was a staff sergeant, nobody outside my own unit had heard of. Men at that level sign more citations in a career than they could ever hold in memory. I didn't expect recognition. I had stopped expecting it a long time ago, the way you stop expecting rain in a drought, not out of bitterness, just out of accuracy. I set the tablecloths down in the banquet hall and got back to work. Renata Cole called Craig Hensley's office line at 9 that same morning. A call I only knew about because Priya, who covered the front desk for 20 minutes while the receptionist took a break, overheard enough of it through the half-open door to repeat it to me later, wide-eyed, in the supply closet. She told him 2 complaints reached corporate this month, Priya said. She told him Regional wants to understand what's happening at the property before they finalize his 90-day review. She's coming Friday morning. In person. Friday morning. The same morning as my Thursday review had already been, if you followed the calendar the way it was supposed to run. Except Hensley moved fast after that call, the way a drowning man moves fast, thrashing for anything that looks like solid ground. He found me Wednesday night instead of waiting for Thursday. "We're moving your review up," he said, catching me by the linen cart outside the banquet hall. "Tomorrow morning. Early, before the reunion association people start arriving for setup." "You said Thursday at 9, I said. Things changed. He didn't meet my eyes when he said it. That was new. Up to that point, Hensley had never had trouble looking straight at me while he said something small. 7 a.m., my office. I understood, standing there, that he wasn't moving my review up because he needed more time. He was moving it up because he needed me gone before someone with more authority than him arrived to ask questions. Firing the longest tenured, cheapest employee in the building was the fastest, ugliest kind of decisiveness a frightened man knows how to perform. 7 a.m., I repeated. "I'll be there." I went back to the banquet hall and finished setting the head table, laying out the small placards with names I didn't recognize. Colonels and majors and one 4-star general who I told myself, again, would never know my name from any distance greater than a photograph clipped to a stack of paperwork, 30 years cold. I was wrong about that. I wouldn't know it for another day. That Wednesday night, walking to my car in the employee lot behind the hotel, I passed a black sedan idling near the loading dock. Government plates. A driver in a dark suit standing outside it checking his watch. I didn't think anything of it. Hotels like the Ashworth Grand host all kinds of arrivals the night before a big event. Advance teams, security details, the quiet machinery that keeps important people's schedules on time. I got in my car. I drove home past the Roanoke Star lit up gold on the mountain. I did not know that the man that sedan was waiting for had already told his aide, over dinner an hour earlier, that he wanted to walk through the Ashworth Grand's lobby himself the next morning, instead of being driven straight to a private entrance. Because he liked, he said, to see how a hotel actually ran before he let it host 200 of his people. General Walter Briggs liked to arrive early. He liked to watch a building at its most honest hour, before the furniture got moved for appearances, before anyone had time to perform for him. He was going to get the Ashworth Grand at its most honest hour, whether anyone there was ready for it or not. I went to bed that Wednesday night without praying, exactly. 22 years in uniform teaches you a complicated relationship with prayer. But I did sit at the kitchen table a long while with Michael's letter unfolded in front of me, reading his shaking handwriting one more time before the morning that was coming for me. Rank doesn't come off with the uniform, Dottie. Don't you ever let anyone make you feel small enough to believe that lie. You were somebody before they gave you that title, and you'll be somebody after they take it away, if they're fool enough to try. I folded it back into its soft creases. I put it in my pocket, against my chest, beside the citation. I went to bed. I did not know that in less than 48 hours, a 4-star general would stand at attention in a hotel lobby because of the exact rank Michael had told me, all those years ago, could never truly be taken from me. Thursday morning, I was in Hensley's office at 6:58, 2 minutes early. I have never in my life walked into a meeting late. Not once, not in 22 years, and not in 11 more after that. He kept me waiting until 7:06 anyway. Standing outside his door with my hands folded, listening to him talk to someone on the phone in a voice pitched for confidence he didn't have. When he finally waved me in, the office looked staged. A single folder sat squared in the center of his desk, corners aligned like he'd practiced setting it down. He didn't offer me a chair. "Dorothy, thank you for coming in early." He opened the folder without looking at it. "I've reviewed your file. I've talked to some of the day staff. I think you know where this is headed." "I imagine I do," I said. "I want this to be clean, professional, no drama." He said the word drama like he expected me to supply some. "Effective today, we're ending your employment with the Ashworth Grand. HR will process your final check. I'd like you to clear out your locker before the reunion association guests start arriving." "I don't want any." He paused, searching for a word that wouldn't sound as ugly as the one he meant. "Any awkwardness during a high-visibility event." "You mean you don't want me seen?" I said. He didn't answer that, which was its own answer. "2 guest complaints came into corporate this month," I said. "Slow valet on a Tuesday, you cut the bell staff to save money. A double-booked wedding block from a system change nobody trained the desk on. Neither of those has my name anywhere near it. Renata Cole is flying in this morning to ask why. And here you are, fresh off that phone call, moving my termination up a full day so I'm gone before she lands." Hensley's face went through something complicated, surprise sliding fast into something meaner. "That's not what this is. I didn't say it was your reason. I said it was your timing." I kept my voice level, the way I'd kept it level with men who outranked him by 3 grades and more temper besides. "You don't have to admit it to me, Craig. I already understand it." He stood up, because standing was the only leverage he had left. He came around the desk. He raised his voice for the first time since I'd known him, the way men do when a quiet person has just said something too accurate to answer. "You don't get to lecture me in my own office," he said. "You clean toilets for a living. I run this hotel." "For now," I said. I meant nothing threatening by it, only the plain truth that titles at the Ashworth Grand had changed 3 times in 11 years and would change again. But I watched the words land on him like a slap anyway. "Get your things," he said. "Today. I'll have security walk you out if I need to." I nodded, once, and turned to go. At the door I stopped. There was one thing I wanted said out loud before I left that office. Not for him, for myself. "I served this country for 22 years, Mr. Hensley. I have cleaned this hotel with my own 2 hands for 11 more. I have never once been late, never once been written up, never once given you a single true reason to do what you're doing. Someday you'll manage a place long enough to understand that the people you can't see are usually the ones holding the roof up." I opened the door. "I hope it doesn't take you as long as it took the last man who thought that way about me." I don't know if he understood that last part. I didn't wait to find out. Word moved through that hotel fast, the way it always does in a building full of people who depend on each other's shifts. By 8, Priya had heard. By 8:15, Ronnie, the night porter, still on the tail end of his shift, found me in the break room folding my apron into my bag. He stood in the doorway with his hat in his hands like he was at a funeral. "This is wrong, Dorothy," he said. "Everybody knows it's wrong. Knowing it and saying it out loud to somebody with the power to change it are two different things, Ronnie. I don't fault anybody for the difference. I made my peace with that difference a long time ago." Priya came in a minute later, eyes red-rimmed. She didn't say anything at all. She just wrapped both arms around me, quick and fierce, and held on a moment longer than either of us expected. "He can't do this," she said into my shoulder. "He can," I said. "He is. Whether he should is a different question, and it's not one I get a vote in this morning." I finished packing my bag. 11 years does not fit easily into a canvas tote, but I made it fit. A spare pair of work shoes, a cracked coffee mug Michael had bought me at a base exchange decades ago that I'd carried from job to job ever since. A small framed photograph of the two of us at a homecoming ceremony, young and sunburned and certain the whole world was still ahead of us. I did not take off my chest pocket. I had never taken it off inside that building, not once in 11 years, and I wasn't going to start on the last morning. At 8:40, security walked me toward the lobby. Not roughly. The young man assigned to it, a kid named Terrell who'd always nodded politely to me in the halls, looked more uncomfortable than I did. He kept apologizing under his breath the whole way. "Sorry, ma'am. This is just procedure. I'm real sorry." Until I finally told him it wasn't his doing and he didn't need to carry any of it. The lobby, when we came into it, was already filling. Reunion Association guests had started arriving early. Small groups in dress blues and dark suits, name tags and lanyards, the particular hum of people who know each other from another life gathering again after years apart. A color guard rehearsed near the ballroom doors, folding and unfolding a flag with the careful, practiced motions I hadn't watched in years, without my own hands wanting to join in. The chandelier threw its light down over all of it. Over the marble Hensley had called my only job. Over the brass elevator doors I knew how to open with a half-inch lift nobody else had bothered to learn. Craig Hensley stood near the front desk, watching the arrivals with the particular pride of a man who believes a well-dressed lobby is proof he's good at his job. He saw me being walked out with Terrell at my elbow and my canvas bag over my shoulder. Instead of letting it happen quietly, he crossed the marble toward us. Some men cannot resist narrating their own small victories out loud. "Dorothy." He said it just loud enough. A few heads turned, the way heads turn at any raised voice in a hushed lobby. "I hope there's no hard feelings. This is just business." I stopped. I looked at him. I thought about Michael's letter folded against my chest. I thought about 22 years of learning exactly when silence serves you and when it doesn't. "There's no hard feelings, Mr. Hensley," I said, calm as still water. "There's just the truth, and the truth doesn't need my feelings to be true. You'll learn that eventually. I hope it's a gentler lesson than the one that's coming." He almost laughed. "Is that a threat?" "No," I said. "It's a weather report." A retired colonel standing nearby with a name tag reading Hollis had gone quiet, watching the exchange. The particular stillness of a man who recognizes something in another person's bearing without yet knowing why. He didn't say anything. He just watched, the way soldiers watch things that don't add up yet. Before Terrell could walk me the last few steps to the door, an older woman in a wheelchair near the ballroom entrance called out. Sharp and clear, cutting through the general murmur of the lobby. "Young man." She was addressing Terrell, not me. Her voice carried the particular authority of someone used to being obeyed. "Where exactly are you taking this woman?" Terrell froze, caught between two instructions he didn't know how to reconcile. "Ma'am, this is a personnel matter. I'm supposed to—" I didn't ask what you were supposed to do. I asked where you're taking her. The woman wheeled herself closer. I saw the small gold pin on her lapel, a gold star pin, the kind given to mothers and widows who have lost someone in service. Something in my chest recognized a fellow traveler before my mind had fully caught up. I've been coming to this reunion for 19 years. I have never once seen an employee of this hotel treated like a criminal in front of guests. I'd like to know why today is different. She was terminated this morning, Terrell said, miserable, clearly wishing he were anywhere else. I'm just following procedure, ma'am. Procedure, the woman repeated, tasting the word like something gone sour. She looked at me directly then. Her eyes, pale and sharp despite her age, moved over my face with an attention most people in that lobby had never once given me. What's your name, dear? Dorothy Vance, ma'am. Vance. She said it slowly, as if testing whether it matched something in her memory. It didn't. Not exactly. Not yet. But I watched her file it away anyway, the way people who have spent a lifetime around service members learn to file away names that might matter later. I'm sorry for whatever's happened to you this morning, Mrs. Vance. I hope somebody in this building comes to their senses before the day is finished. Thank you, ma'am, I said, and I meant it. In a lobby full of people who had looked away from what was happening to me, an 80-year-old woman in a wheelchair had been the only one willing to look directly at it and ask a question out loud. Craig Hensley, watching this exchange from near the front desk, had the good sense at least to say nothing, though I saw him glance toward his office as if calculating how quickly he could disappear into it. I did not know, walking out those doors a few minutes later, that the woman in the wheelchair was the widow of a 3-star general herself. Her late husband had served 2 decades earlier alongside men who would, within 24 hours, be standing in that very lobby watching a different kind of recognition unfold. I did not know she would mention the incident, in passing, to an old friend attending the same reunion, a friend married to the aide traveling with General Walter Briggs. I did not know that small, ordinary kindnesses from strangers sometimes travel faster and further than the cruelties they're meant to answer. I only knew, in that moment, that an old woman with a gold star pin had looked me in the eye when nobody else in that lobby had bothered to. Her question, "Where exactly are you taking her?" had cracked open, just slightly, the first seam in a morning that had otherwise gone entirely Craig Hensley's way. I turned to go, Terrell falling into step beside me, my bag heavy on my shoulder with 11 years folded down into canvas and cardboard. That's when the front doors opened. The cold morning air came in ahead of a man in a gray civilian suit, whose bearing I would have recognized blindfolded. Some men carry command in their spine, the way other men carry height or weight, an inheritance of posture that never leaves them no matter what clothes they put on top of it. He had 2 aides a step behind him and a driver already peeling off toward the valet stand. He came through those doors the way he'd come through 1,000 doors before, scanning a room in the first half-second the way officers learn to and never unlearn, taking in the color guard, the chandelier, the reunion crowd gathering by the ballroom, the young man in a security polo walking an older woman toward the exit with a canvas bag over her shoulder. I did not know him. I had never stood in a room with Walter Briggs in my life, but something in the set of his shoulders, in the unhurried authority of his stride across that marble, made every retired officer in that lobby straighten without being told to. The old muscle memory of rank recognizing rank from across a crowded room. He crossed maybe half the lobby before his eyes settled on me. I felt it the way you feel a change in air pressure before a storm, a full second before anything happened at all. I did not yet understand why a stranger's gaze had found me and stayed, out of every person gathered under that chandelier. I would understand it eventually. Not that morning, and not in the way anyone in that lobby expected, because General Walter Briggs did not stop walking. His eyes found me, held a half-second longer than a stranger's glance should, and then he looked away, distracted by an aide murmuring something about his schedule. He continued on toward the ballroom doors where the color guard waited. The moment passed, ordinary as any other moment in a busy lobby, and I told myself I had imagined the weight of it. Craig Hensley, for his part, noticed nothing at all. He was too busy watching me leave to notice a four-star general had looked twice at the woman he'd just fired. "Have a good life, Dorothy," he said. There was something almost cheerful in it, the particular cruelty of a man who believes he has already won and can afford magnanimity. I didn't answer him. Terrell walked me the rest of the way to the employee entrance, apologizing again under his breath. I stepped out into the gray Roanoke morning with my canvas bag over my shoulder and 11 years behind me. I did not look back at the chandelier. I have never in my life been a woman who looks back at a door once she's decided to walk through it. I drove home. I sat at my kitchen table with a cup of coffee going cold in front of me. For the first time in longer than I could remember, I did not know what to do with a morning. 11 years of rhythm, gone in the space of a single conversation. I thought about calling my sister in Lynchburg. I decided against it. There was nothing she could do from 2 hours away except worry, and I had never been in the business of manufacturing worry in people who loved me. Instead, I sat with Michael's letter. I read it again, slower this time, the way you read something when you finally have the whole morning free to read it properly. You were somebody before they gave you that title, and you'll be somebody after they take it away if they're fool enough to try. I folded it back into its creases. I sat there a long while, watching the light move across my kitchen table, thinking about the strange half-second when a stranger in a gray suit had looked at me like he'd almost recognized something, and then hadn't. I did not know, sitting there, that Walter Briggs had spent the rest of that morning distracted, turning a half-formed thought over and over, the way you turn over a word on the tip of your tongue. I did not know that somewhere in the Ashworth Grand's ballroom, while I sat 2 miles away with a cooling cup of coffee, he was watching the color guard rehearse and thinking, without quite knowing why, about a face he'd seen for less than a second, crossing a hotel lobby. An old habit from 30 years of reading rooms for danger and reading faces for the truth underneath them. He mentioned it almost offhand to his aide over lunch that afternoon. A sharp young captain named Reyes, who had served with him for 3 years and had learned to take the general's offhand comments seriously because they rarely stayed offhand for long. "There was a woman in the lobby this morning," Briggs said, turning his water glass slowly on the tablecloth. "Older, being escorted out by hotel security. I only saw her for a second, but something in the way she carried herself stopped me mid-sentence, and I still can't tell you why." "Did you get a name, sir?" "No, and I should have. 30 years reading rooms and I let the moment pass because Voss's replacement was in my ear about the seating chart." He shook his head, more at himself than at anyone else. "See if you can find out what happened to her, Captain." Quietly. "I'm not asking for a reason yet. I'm asking because it's bothering me, and things that bother me for no clear reason have, more often than not, turned out to have a very clear reason underneath them." Captain Reyes made a few careful inquiries that afternoon, discreet enough not to draw attention. He learned only fragments. A housekeeping employee terminated that morning. Some disagreement with the new general manager. Nothing that explained the particular weight Briggs had described. It was Colonel Hollis, mentioning the incident in passing to the event coordinator, who finally supplied the detail that mattered. the woman's name. Dorothy Vance, repeated back to Captain Reyes almost as an afterthought, during a conversation about audiovisual equipment for the evening's program. Reyes brought the name to Briggs that evening, not thinking much of it himself, simply passing along a thread he'd been asked to pull. Vance, Briggs repeated. Something in his face changed, slow at first. The particular stillness of a man reaching back through decades of paperwork toward a memory he hadn't touched in a very long time. Say that again. Dorothy Vance, sir. Housekeeping. 11 years at this property, according to what the colonel understood. Terminated yesterday morning. Briggs did not answer immediately. He set down the folder he'd been reviewing. He walked to the window of his hotel room. He stood there a long moment, looking out over Roanoke's evening skyline, the mountain with its star just beginning to catch the last of the daylight. Master Sergeant Dorothy Jean Vance, he said finally, more to himself than to Reyes. 22nd Support Battalion, 2003. He turned back around. Reyes told me later, when I finally met him properly, that he had never in 3 years of service seen that particular expression on the general's face. Something between grief and disbelief, and a kind of fierce, sudden purpose. I signed a Bronze Star citation with that name on it 31 years ago. I have thought about the woman behind that name more times over 3 decades than I could count. I never once expected to find her cleaning a hotel floor 200 feet from where I was about to give a speech about honoring service. Sir, I can have my office pull the personnel file first thing in the morning, if you'd like to confirm before we... Number. Briggs's voice had gone hard in a way Reyes said he rarely heard. I don't need a file to confirm a name I signed myself. I need to find her, tonight if possible, tomorrow at the latest. I need this hotel to understand exactly what they did yesterday morning before this reunion is finished. He picked up his room phone. Get me whoever runs this property, not the front desk, whoever actually runs it. That was how the wheels began turning that would, by the next morning, bring Renata Cole's phone call to my kitchen table and put me back inside a building I had told myself, only a day earlier, I would never walk into again. I did not know that Renata Cole's flight had landed 40 minutes late, that she was already in a rental car on her way to the Ashworth Grand with a folder of her own. One with Craig Hensley's name printed at the top and 2 guest complaints stapled inside, and a note in the margin in her own handwriting that read confirm staffing decisions before assuming root cause. And I did not know that Priya, on her lunch break, furious in a way that had not cooled since that morning, had gone looking for someone in that building willing to listen to her. She found, instead of a manager or an HR representative, a retired Army colonel named Hollis standing near the coffee station in the lobby, still turning over the same exchange he'd witnessed an hour earlier. The calm woman with the canvas bag and her strange, level warning to a man twice her rank in that room, though none of them wore uniforms. "Excuse me," Priya said to him. She was 26 and out of other options, and desperate enough to try a stranger. "Did you see what happened this morning? The woman who got fired? Dorothy. She's worked here 11 years, and they walked her out like a criminal over nothing." Colonel Hollis studied her a moment. The older woman, gray uniform shirt, canvas bag. "Yes, that's her. She said something to the young manager on her way out, about a weather report." He frowned, the particular frown of a man cataloging a detail his instincts insisted mattered more than it appeared to. There was something in the way she carried herself. "I've spent 30 years around soldiers, young lady. I know the walk when I see it. That woman has worn a uniform." Priya's eyes went wide. "She never talks about it. Ever. I asked her once if she had family, and that's as far as she'd go." "Some of them don't talk about it," Hollis said quietly. The ones who saw the real thing usually don't. He looked toward the ballroom doors, where the color guard was still practicing, where General Briggs stood in quiet conversation with the event coordinator. What was her last name? Vance, Priya said. Dorothy Vance. Hollis said nothing for a moment. The name meant nothing to him directly, but something in the shape of it, in the coincidence of an old soldier's bearing walking out of a lobby the same morning, a four-star general arrived early to watch a hotel at its most honest hour, made him decide the coincidence was worth mentioning to someone. He found the event coordinator 20 minutes later. He asked, mostly out of curiosity, whether the general had said anything about the woman with the canvas bag. The coordinator hadn't noticed anything at all, too buried in seating charts and audiovisual checks to register a passing glance in a busy lobby. Hollis let it go for the moment, filing it away the way old soldiers file away details that don't fit yet, trusting that time would eventually explain them. He did not know that he had just planted the first seed of a thread that would, within 24 hours, pull an entire hotel's chain of command apart and put it back together in a shape none of them expected. Neither did I. I spent that Thursday afternoon doing ordinary, unremarkable things. The things a person does when a life's rhythm has been interrupted and the body doesn't yet know what to do with the extra hours. I cleaned my own kitchen, which did not need it. I called the unemployment office and sat on hold for 40 minutes listening to music meant to be soothing. I drove past the Ashworth Grand once, slow, on my way to the grocery store. I looked at the chandelier glowing gold through the front windows in the late afternoon light. I felt something I hadn't expected to feel. Grief, plain and simple, for a building I had loved the way you love a place that gave you somewhere to put your hands and your grief both, for 11 quiet years. I did not go back inside. I told myself I wouldn't. Not for a very long time. Maybe not ever. I believed it completely as I said it to myself, the way you believe things right up until the moment life proves you wrong. Friday morning, the day of the banquet, I was not planning to set foot anywhere near Jefferson Street. I had a coffee mug in my hand and the local news on low in the background. I was thinking about calling my sister after all, when my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. A Roanoke exchange. Against my better judgment, I answered it. Is this Dorothy Vance, Dorothy? A woman's voice, brisk, professional, faintly out of breath, like she was walking fast down a hallway while she talked. Speaking. Ms. Vance, my name is Renata Cole. I'm the regional director for the company that owns the Ashworth Grand Hotel. I understand you were terminated yesterday morning. I'd like to ask you to come back to the property this morning, if you're willing. There are some questions I need answered, and I believe you're the only person who can answer them accurately. I stood very still in my kitchen, the coffee going cold in my hand for the second time in 2 days. What kind of questions, Ms. Cole? The kind, she said, that a hotel doesn't usually have to ask about the woman who cleans its lobby floor. But this one does. I'd rather ask them with you standing in front of me than read about them in a personnel file that I'm increasingly certain doesn't tell the whole story. I did not know, hanging up that phone 20 minutes later, exactly what had put that particular urgency into Renata Cole's voice. I would learn, before that Friday was finished, that it had started small. A retired colonel mentioning an old soldier's walk to an event coordinator, who happened to repeat it in passing, to a front desk supervisor helping Ms. Cole review the previous day's incident reports, who repeated it, in turn, to Ms. Cole herself, along with the detail that the fired employee's last name was Vance, a name that meant nothing to any of them. But it would, within the hour, mean everything to a man 3 floors above them, getting dressed in his hotel room for a banquet he had traveled 2 states to attend. I put on my good coat. I checked my chest pocket out of the old habit. I felt the citation and the letter both still folded soft against my heart. I drove back to the Ashworth Grand for what I told myself would be one last conversation, never imagining it would be the morning everything I had carried quietly for 31 years finally came due. Renata Cole met me at the employee entrance herself, which surprised me. She was younger than her voice on the phone had suggested, maybe 45, sharp-eyed, dressed for travel rather than for show. She shook my hand with the particular directness of a person who has learned not to waste other people's time. "Thank you for coming back, Ms. Vance," she said. "I know that's asking a lot, given the circumstances." "You said you had questions," I said. "I'd rather answer them than wonder about them." She led me not to Hensley's office, but to a small conference room off the back hallway, away from the lobby, away from the banquet preparations already underway 2 floors up. A thin folder sat on the table. Beside it, a laptop open to what looked like a spreadsheet of dates and names. "I'll be straightforward with you," she said, sitting across from me. "2 guest complaints came into my office this month. Both trace back to staffing decisions Mr. Hensley made without corporate approval. Cutting the overnight bell staff, skipping training on a system change. Yesterday, I learned he fired an 11-year employee with a spotless record, the day before I was scheduled to arrive, over what his paperwork calls repeated performance issues that exist nowhere in your personnel file prior to 6 weeks ago." She tapped the folder. "I don't think you were fired for performance, Ms. Vance. I think you were fired because you were the cheapest name on a list he needed to shorten to look decisive before I got here." "That matches my understanding," I said. "I'd like your account of the last 6 weeks. Everything. Dates, if you have them." So I gave it to her, plainly, without embellishment, the way I'd once given after-action reports to officers who needed facts, not feelings. The coffee stain at 4 in the morning, the clipboard review with no witnesses and no documentation. The review moved up a full day the moment corporate scheduled a visit. Ronnie's discomfort. Priya's anger. I did not editorialize. I let the timeline do the work timelines are built to do. I watched Renata Cole's jaw tighten with each date. The particular anger of a competent person watching incompetence dressed up as authority. "This is enough to end his employment on its own," she said, half to herself, closing the laptop. "But I'll be honest with you about something else, Ms. Vance, because I think you deserve honesty in return for what you just gave me." She hesitated, an unusual thing for a woman who did not strike me as someone who hesitated often. 20 minutes ago, one of my front desk supervisors mentioned something odd to me. A retired colonel attending this weekend's reunion told her yesterday that the woman who got walked out of this lobby carried herself like a soldier. And when she repeated your name to a member of General Briggs's staff, purely in passing, the aide asked her to repeat it twice. Then he asked which unit you'd served in. I felt my chest tighten. An old, familiar tightening. The kind that comes right before a door opens onto something you have spent years keeping carefully shut. "I don't know why that would interest anyone," I said, which was not entirely a lie. I genuinely did not know, not yet, though some old instinct in me had already begun to suspect. "Ms. Vance." Renata Cole leaned forward. "I looked at your intake paperwork from 11 years ago. The basic employment file. Nothing classified, nothing dramatic. It lists your prior employer as, and I'm quoting it exactly, United States Army, 22 years, honorable discharge. Nobody in this building ever asked you a single follow-up question about that in over a decade. Is that correct?" "That's correct." "May I ask what rank you held?" I sat with that question a moment. 22 years of discipline told me to keep it simple, to keep it small, the way I had kept it small for 11 years inside that building. But something else, something that had been quietly wearing away at that discipline since the moment Craig Hensley called me disposable in front of a half-asleep porter, told me the time for smallness had passed. "Master Sergeant," I said, "retired." Renata Cole sat back slowly. Whatever she had expected, that answer landed somewhere she hadn't fully prepared for. And the general upstairs or his staff would have reason to recognize that rank specifically? Or your name specifically? "I don't know," I said honestly. "I served 22 years. A great many people have seen my name on paperwork over that time. Most of them never met me. I have no reason to think General Briggs is any different." But even as I said it, my hand had gone, without my permission, to the pocket over my heart. Renata Cole's eyes followed the motion. Something in her face told me she had noticed and filed it away, the same way Colonel Hollis had filed away my walk across a lobby the morning before. There was a knock at the conference room door. A young front desk supervisor leaned in, her face flushed with the particular urgency of someone carrying a message she doesn't fully understand, but knows is important. "Ms. Cole, I'm sorry to interrupt. General Briggs's aide is asking if there's a Dorothy Vance still on the property. He says the general would like a word if she's available." The room went quiet in a way small rooms rarely do. "Tell him," Renata Cole said slowly, watching my face the entire time, "that Ms. Vance is here and that we'll be right up." I did not move for a moment. 31 years of carrying a citation and a letter folded against my chest. 31 years of nobody asking. And now, on the worst professional morning of the last decade of my life, a 4-star general wanted a word. "Ms. Vance." Renata Cole's voice had softened, just slightly. "Whatever this is, I don't think it's bad news. I've been doing this job a long time. Generals do not send aides looking for cleaning staff who've been fired the day before, unless something about that firing matters to them a great deal more than it matters to us." I stood up, my knees, 64 years old, and asked to hold steady more than they wanted to that week, did their job anyway, the way they always had. "Then I suppose we should go find out," I said. Before we left that conference room, Renata Cole asked me one more question, almost as an afterthought, though I would come to understand later that nothing she asked that morning was truly an afterthought. "Ms. Vance, when Mr. Hensley terminated you, did he give you anything in writing? A separation letter? A formal notice? Anything with his signature on it?" "He gave me nothing," I said. "He told me to clear my locker and had security walk me out. No letter. No form." She made a note, her pen moving fast across a legal pad. "That matters more than you might think. Termination without documentation, especially for an employee with your tenure, is itself a violation of this company's policy, separate from whatever else may or may not be true about your service record. I want that on paper before this day is finished, in your own words, while it's fresh." I gave her the account again, this time in writing, sitting at that small conference table while she waited. I watched her read it twice, slowly, the second time with the particular care of someone building a case she intended to win. "There's something else," she said, once I'd finished. "The 2 guest complaints I mentioned. I've since learned there's a third, from 3 weeks ago, that Mr. Hensley never reported to corporate at all. A guest in room 411 complained that a maintenance issue, a broken lock, went unaddressed for 6 days, despite 2 written requests. The guest was a retired brigadier general, attending a smaller reunion function early. He wrote a letter directly to our corporate office last week, separate from anything happening today, expressing concern about declining standards at this property under new management." She looked up at me. "I only just connected that letter to today's events an hour ago. It's an entirely separate thread, but it tells the same story from a different room in this same hotel." I sat with that a moment. turning it over. So this was never only about me. No, she said. It never was. You're simply the loudest example of a pattern that was already visible before I ever heard your name. She closed the folder. That should tell you something too, Ms. Vance. This isn't a story about one cruel man making one bad decision. It's a story about what happens in a building when the person in charge stops seeing anyone beneath him as fully human. You were the first person he was careless enough to do that to where it could be proven. You almost certainly won't be the only name on this list by the time I finish my review. We walked together toward the lobby. Renata Cole, a half step behind me out of some instinct I think surprised her as much as it did me. The deference of a corporate director falling in behind a woman in a plain coat because something ancient and unspoken told her the order of things in that hallway had just quietly reversed itself. The lobby, when we reached it, was full. Reunion guests in dress blues and dark suits stood in clusters near the ballroom doors, waiting for the banquet's pre-reception to open. The color guard stood at ease near the flag stand, rehearsals finished, the real thing only hours away. Near the front desk, Craig Hensley stood in a fresh suit, clearly dressed for the evening's event, deep in conversation with the same young supervisor who had delivered the message. His face carried the particular confusion of a man who has just heard his fired employee's name spoken with far more weight than he understood it to carry. He saw me come around the corner with Renata Cole at my shoulder. His face did something complicated, surprise curdling fast into suspicion. "What is she doing back here?" he said, not quite to Renata Cole, not quite to himself. "General Briggs asked for her," Renata Cole said, flat and even, directly, by name. I watched every trace of confidence drain out of Craig Hensley's face in real time. The particular color a man goes when the ground he thought was solid announces, without warning, that it never was. Across the lobby, near the ballroom doors, a tall man in dress blues with 4 silver stars on each shoulder turned from the conversation he'd been having with an aide. His eyes found mine across 40 feet of marble, the same way they had the morning before, except this time he did not look away. This time he held my gaze. Something crossed his face I had only ever seen on the faces of soldiers recognizing something they had stopped hoping to find. General Walter Briggs began to walk toward me, unhurried, deliberate, the whole lobby slowly turning to watch him do it. He did not stop at conversational distance the way strangers do. He closed the whole 40 feet. He stood close enough that I could see his eyes were pale gray, older than the rest of his face. The eyes of a man who had spent a career looking at things most people never had to see. "Master Sergeant Vance," he said, quiet, almost careful, as if testing whether the name still fit the woman standing in front of him after so many years. "Dorothy Vance, 22nd Support Battalion." I felt the floor tilt under me the way it had not tilted in a very long time. "Yes, sir," I said. "That's correct. You served under Colonel Whitfield in '03, the convoy support element out of the Eastern Corridor." "Yes, sir." My voice had gone smaller than I wanted it to. 31 years compressing into 2 words. "I signed your Bronze Star citation," he said. 2 levels above the recommending officer, the way those things worked back then. I don't sign many personally. I remembered the name because the after-action report I read that year was one of the finest pieces of writing I ever saw come out of a combat zone, and because the woman who wrote it saved 4 vehicles and 11 soldiers by refusing to leave a jackknife truck behind under fire long enough to drag 2 wounded men clear of it herself. He paused. "I have thought about that report more than once over the years, Master Sergeant. I never thought I'd meet the woman who wrote it while she was carrying a cleaning cart through a hotel lobby." Behind me, I heard Craig Hensley make a small sound, something between a cough and a word that never fully formed. I did not turn around. I had spent 11 years not turning around for that man. I saw no reason to start now. I didn't advertise it, sir, I said. It wasn't anyone's business what I used to be. No, General Briggs said. Something moved behind his eyes. Old grief mixed with old pride. In a combination I recognized because I carried the same combination myself. It wasn't anyone's business, but it should have mattered to somebody. And it seems, from what my aide tells me, that yesterday it mattered to exactly nobody in this building. He turned, then, deliberate as a man executing a drill he'd practiced 1,000 times, and faced Craig Hensley directly. "You're the general manager," Briggs said. It was not a question. "Yes, sir." Hensley's voice had lost every trace of the confidence it carried the day before. "Craig Hensley, it's an honor to— Did you know who this woman was when you terminated her yesterday morning?" I— Hensley's mouth opened and closed. "No, sir, I didn't. Her personnel file doesn't— There's nothing in the system that indicates. Would it have mattered if you had known?" The question hung in the lobby the way certain questions do, loud in their silence. I watched Craig Hensley search for an answer that wouldn't damn him further and find that no such answer existed. "I don't know how to answer that, sir," he finally said. "That," Briggs said quietly, "is itself an answer, Mr. Hensley. A man who treats people decently doesn't need to know their history first. He treats them decently because it's the only way to treat a person who is doing honest work in front of you. You looked at a 64-year-old woman cleaning your lobby floor and decided, on your own authority, that she was disposable. You didn't need her rank to know that was wrong. You needed character, and it appears you were short of it." Renata Cole stepped forward then, folder still in hand, her voice steady despite what I could see was considerable strain. "General Briggs, I'm Renata Cole, Regional Director for the Ownership Group. I want you to know, we take this seriously. I flew in this morning specifically because of concerns about Mr. Hensley's management decisions, entirely independent of what you've just told us." "Good," Briggs said. "Then you already understand what needs to happen next, and I won't need to explain it to you." He turned back to me. Something in his posture shifted, the drill precision of the confrontation softening into something more personal, more private, though we still stood in the middle of a crowded lobby with 200 reunion guests, watching a scene none of them fully understood yet. "I owe you an apology I can't fully give," he said. 31 years, and the army let you walk out of every room you ever served in without the thanks you were owed. Now I find you walking out of a hotel lobby the same way. That's twice this country has let you leave quietly when it should have made you stay and be seen." "I chose the quiet, sir," I said. "Most of it anyway. It suited me." "Maybe," he said. "But choosing quiet and being denied recognition are two different things, Master Sergeant. I intend to correct at least one of them today." He turned to his aide, a sharp young captain who had been standing a respectful few feet back through the entire exchange, and said something low I didn't catch. The captain nodded and moved off quickly toward the ballroom. "There's a citation in your personnel record, is there not?" Briggs said to me, "that you still carry?" I hesitated only a moment before reaching into my coat, into the pocket over my heart, and drawing out the folded paper, soft as cloth from 31 years of careful handling. I held it out to him. He took it with both hands, the way you'd take something fragile and irreplaceable. He unfolded it slowly. He read words he had signed himself 3 decades earlier. "For heroism in connection with military operations against an armed enemy of the United States," he read aloud, quiet at first, then deliberately louder. The words carried across the lobby to the reunion guests who had begun to gather closer. drawn by the strange gravity of a four-star general standing at attention in front of a woman in a plain coat. Master Sergeant Dorothy Jean Vance, for conspicuous courage and selfless service in the extraction of wounded personnel under direct hostile fire. The lobby had gone very quiet. I could hear the ice machine somewhere down the hall. The small, ordinary sound of a building running exactly as it always had, indifferent to the fact that everything in it had just changed. "I remember signing this," Briggs said, refolding it with a care that matched my own 31 years of handling, and holding it back out to me. I remember thinking, at the time, that the Army was not good enough for the men and women who did the things described in reports like this one. I still believe that. I have believed it for 31 years. I have never once had the chance to say it to the person the report was written about. He straightened. "I intend to say it now, in front of everyone in this lobby. You have gone unseen long enough, Master Sergeant Vance. I will not let you leave this building unseen again." And then General Walter Briggs stepped back exactly one pace on the marble floor I had polished 10,000 mornings, 4 stars on each shoulder, 31 years my senior in rank, though standing before me now as something closer to an equal. He came to full attention, spine straight, chin level. He raised his right hand in a salute so precise and so deliberate that the whole lobby seemed to draw one collective breath and hold it. Nobody laughed, not one person. I brought my own hand up, slow, 64 years old in a plain wool coat. I held that salute across from a 4-star general in a hotel lobby in Roanoke, Virginia. The marble underneath us held perfectly still. The chandelier light did not waver. For 3 full seconds, nobody in that room breathed. He held it until I lowered mine. Then he lowered his. The room stayed silent a moment longer, the way rooms do after something true has happened in them, before anyone quite knows how to move again. I will not tell you I did not cry. I had trained myself out of crying easily a long time ago, in a life that gave me more reasons to cry than I could afford to indulge. But standing in that lobby with a general's salute still warm in the air, I felt my eyes fill. I did not fight it. I did not need to. Nobody in that room was laughing at me anymore. Craig Hensley stood 3 feet away, his fresh suit suddenly looking like a costume, his face the color of the marble under his feet. Renata Cole broke the silence first, her voice steady but clearly moved. "Mr. Hensley," she said, "you're relieved of your duties as general manager of this property, effective immediately. Corporate security will assist you in collecting your belongings. We'll discuss the terms through HR. Ms. Cole," he started. I said effective immediately. Her voice did not rise, but it left no room for argument. "I flew here this morning to review 2 guest complaints. I'm leaving having witnessed a decorated combat veteran terminated over a coffee stain the day before a general arrived to honor her. There is no version of this conversation where you keep your position." Hensley looked at me then. Something in his face had finally, after 2 days, become honest. Not the honesty of decency. Not yet. The honesty of a man who has run out of stories to tell himself about his own behavior. "I didn't know," he said, quiet now, all the performance gone out of his voice. "I want you to know that. I didn't know who you were." "You didn't need to know who I was," I said, echoing the general without meaning to. "You needed to treat me like a person regardless." "That's the part you missed, Mr. Hensley. Not the rank. The person." He didn't have an answer for that. He simply nodded and turned and walked toward the service hallway with a security officer at his elbow. The lobby watched him go the way you watch weather clear after a storm, relieved and a little stunned by how fast it had passed. Priya had appeared somewhere in the crowd. I never saw exactly when. She was crying openly, both hands pressed over her mouth. Ronnie stood beside her, his porter's cap in his hands again, shaking his head slowly like a man trying to reconcile two versions of the same reality. General Briggs turned back to me once Hensley had gone. "Master Sergeant, I have a favor to ask, and you're within your rights to refuse it. Ask, sir. I'm delivering the keynote remarks at tonight's banquet. I had planned to speak about service and sacrifice in the abstract, the way these speeches usually go." He looked at me steadily. "I would like your permission to speak about you instead. Specifically, by name. I think 200 people in that ballroom tonight need to hear what happened in this lobby today, and I think you have earned the right to decide whether they do." I thought of 11 years of quiet, of the linen closets and the brass elevator doors and the chest pocket nobody had ever asked about. I thought of Michael's letter and what he would have wanted me to say. "You have my permission, sir," I said. "On one condition. Name it. You tell them about the night crew too. Not just me. The people who hold up buildings like this one and never get asked their names. If you're going to make an example of me, make it useful to somebody besides me." Something like a smile crossed his weathered face. The first real warmth I'd seen in it since he'd walked through those doors. "That," he said, "sounds exactly like something the woman who wrote that after-action report would say." That evening I did not go home. Renata Cole, in a gesture I hadn't expected and didn't quite know how to receive, arranged for me to attend the banquet as a guest, seated near the front, in a dress I borrowed from my sister over a hurried phone call and an even more hurried drive to Lynchburg and back. I sat at a round table with white linen I recognized as my own careful pressing from 2 days before, under a chandelier I had polished more mornings than I could count. I watched 200 people in dress blues and evening wear settle into their seats, unaware that the woman 2 tables from the head table had, 48 hours earlier, been walked out of that same building by hotel security. General Briggs took the podium at 8:15. He spoke first about the reunion, about the association's decades of work honoring veterans across 3 wars' worth of service, the ordinary opening remarks any keynote speaker gives. Then he paused. He set his prepared notes aside. He looked out over the room. "I want to tell you about something that happened in this hotel's lobby 7 hours ago," he said, "because I think it matters more than anything I'd planned to say tonight." He told them. All of it. The coffee stain, the clipboard review with no documentation, the termination moved up a day to avoid a corporate visit, the walk across the marble with a canvas bag over her shoulder. He told them about a Bronze Star citation he had signed personally in 2003, a jackknifed truck under hostile fire, 2 wounded soldiers pulled clear by a woman who never once, in 11 years of working in that very building, told a single person what she had done to earn it. "Her name is Dorothy Jean Vance," he said. 200 faces turned to find me at my table. I felt the weight of every one of those eyes land on me at once. The opposite of invisible. The opposite of everything Craig Hensley had decided I was. Master Sergeant, United States Army, retired. She has been cleaning this hotel's floors for 11 years. Yesterday morning, a manager who did not bother to ask her a single question about her life decided she was disposable. He let that sentence sit in the ballroom a long moment. The way I imagined he'd let hard truths sit in rooms his entire career. "I want every person in this room to understand something," he continued. "The people who hold up the buildings we gather in, the people who clean the floors and carry the trays and stand the overnight shifts. They are not invisible because they lack worth. They are invisible because we have decided, collectively, not to look." Master Sergeant Vance did not need a general's salute to have earned her dignity. She earned it the moment she pulled two wounded men clear of a burning truck in 2003. She has carried that dignity every single day since, whether anyone in this room saw it or not. Today, for once, somebody finally looked. The applause that followed was not the polite applause of a banquet crowd. It rose slow, and then all at once. 200 people coming to their feet across a ballroom I had vacuumed 100 times. I sat there in my sister's borrowed dress with my hands over my mouth, and I let myself, finally, be seen. General Briggs did not stop there. He raised a hand for quiet. The room settled. He looked back down at me with something gentler in his expression, the formal weight of the speech giving way to something more personal. "There is one more thing," he said. "Master Sergeant Vance asked me, before I came up here tonight, to say something on her behalf. Not about herself, about the people she works beside." He glanced at a note card in his hand. "There is a woman on this hotel's overnight cleaning staff named Maria Delgado, who has a disabled son and covers 2 jobs to pay for his care. There is a night porter named Ronnie Castell, who has worked this property for 6 years without a single complaint against him. There is a young front desk associate named Priya Anand, who was the only member of this staff willing to stand up for a colleague when it cost her something to do it." He looked out at the room. "I am asking this hotel's ownership publicly, tonight, to remember that every building this fine is held up by people most of us never learn the names of. I am asking you, when you leave this ballroom, to learn one." Renata Cole, seated at a table near the front, rose to her feet before anyone else did. She nodded once. A promise made in front of 200 witnesses that I understood she intended to keep. The rest of that evening passed in a blur of handshakes and introductions. Retired colonels and majors coming to my table one by one, some of them simply to shake my hand, some of them to tell me quietly about their own convoy, their own bad night, their own unspoken debt to soldiers who never got their names in a program. Colonel Hollis found me near the dessert course and apologized, oddly, for not saying something sooner. "I saw it in your walk yesterday morning," he said. "I should have said something to somebody besides an event coordinator who didn't know what to do with it." "You said something to the right person eventually," I told him. "That's usually enough." Priya found me last, after most of the tables had cleared. She hugged me the way she had in the break room 2 days before, fierce and quick, except this time she was smiling through the tears instead of crying alone into my shoulder. "I knew there was something," she said. "I always knew there was something you weren't telling us." "Some things aren't meant to be a story you tell at work," I said. "They're meant to be a weight you carry quietly until the day you don't have to anymore." The following Monday, Renata Cole called me at home. She asked me to come in, not as an employee being disciplined, but as a woman she wanted to formally reinstate. I sat across from her in the same small conference room where I had given her my timeline 3 days earlier. This time there was a different folder on the table, one with my name on it, and a check inside for the 2 days of back pay I had lost, and a letter of formal apology signed by the ownership group's regional president, a man I had never met and likely never would. "I want to be honest with you about something," Renata Cole said. "I could offer you your old position back on the overnight cleaning staff, and I would understand completely if that isn't the offer you want to hear. You could ask for a great deal more than that, Ms. Vance, and I suspect this company would find a way to say yes." I thought about it a long moment, turning the question over, the way I'd turned over harder ones in another life. "I don't want a promotion I didn't earn through the work I actually do," I said. "I loved that hotel long before anyone in it knew what I used to be. I'd like my old shift back, the overnight one. 3 in the morning is still my favorite hour in that building, general or no general." Something in Renata Cole's face softened at that. An understanding passing between us that had nothing to do with rank or corporate policy. Then you'll have it, she said. But I want you to know something else changes too. Effective this month, this property is instituting a wage floor increase for all overnight staff, a mandatory second review process before any termination involving more than 5 years of tenure, a training fund for anyone on the night crew who wants to pursue additional certifications. She slid a single sheet of paper across the table. Maria Delgado starts a paid CNA training program next month, fully covered. Ronnie Castell has been offered the assistant facilities manager position, if he wants it. Priya Anand has been recommended for the hotel's management trainee track. I looked at that list a long time. I thought about a general standing in front of 200 people asking them to learn a name. I understood, sitting there, that the thing I had wanted most, more than an apology, more than back pay, more even than the salute itself, was exactly this. Proof that being seen once could change something for the people who came after me, not just for me. Thank you, I said, and I meant it more fully than those two words usually carry. The new general manager, a woman named Patricia Alvarez, transferred in from a sister property in Charlottesville, met with the entire night crew personally in her first week. Something Craig Hensley had never once done in 6. She asked Ronnie about his 6 years there before she asked him a single question about his duties. She learned Priya's last name correctly on the first try. On her second day, she found me in the east hallway at 4 in the morning, buffing the marble under the chandelier. Instead of finding fault with anything, she simply said, "Good morning," asked if I needed anything, and let me finish my floor in peace. I met Maria Delgado properly for the first time that same week, though I had passed her in service hallways for years without ever exchanging more than a nod. She worked the day shift on the 3rd and 4th floors. A quiet, sturdy woman a decade younger than me, with a son named Eli who had cerebral palsy and needed more care than her single income had ever comfortably covered. She found me in the break room one afternoon, hesitant, twisting a coffee cup between her hands. "I heard what happened to you," she said. "I heard what you asked for. For me, the CNA program." She looked at me like she wasn't sure she was allowed to say what came next. Nobody's ever asked for something on my behalf before. Not like that. Not in front of people who could actually do something about it. "You didn't ask me to," I said. "I just told the truth about who holds this building up. You were part of that truth. I don't know how to thank you for that." "You don't need to thank me," I said. "You need to finish that program. Then you need to remember, every single day after, what it felt like to have somebody see you when you didn't expect it. And then you do the same thing for somebody else when your turn comes. That's the whole payment. That's all any of us ever really owe." She started the program 3 weeks later, evenings after her shift. She finished it 11 months after that. She sent me a photograph of her certificate the day she got it. I keep that photograph now in the same drawer at home where I keep Michael's old Base Exchange mug. Small proofs that some kindnesses, once set moving, keep moving long after the person who started them has stopped watching. Ronnie took the assistant facilities manager position, though it took him nearly a month to convince himself he deserved it. He came to me the week before he accepted it, nervous in a way I hadn't seen from him before, and asked whether I thought he was ready. "You fixed that ice machine on the 7th floor blind, in the dark, at 2 in the morning, more times than I can count," I told him. "You've been ready for years, Ronnie. Nobody ever asked you the question before. That's not the same thing as not being ready." He took the job. He still stops by the east hallway most mornings around 4, the way he always did. except now he brings 2 cups of coffee instead of leaving me to make my own. We stand there a few minutes some mornings, not saying much. The comfortable quiet of two people who went through something together and came out the other side of it still able to look each other in the eye. I ran into Colonel Hollis again, purely by chance, at a diner off Route 11 the following autumn. He insisted on buying my coffee, waving off my objection before I'd even finished raising it. "I've thought about that morning more than I probably should," he told me, sliding into the booth across from me, uninvited, but not unwelcome. "The way you carried yourself, walking out with that bag over your shoulder." I knew something in my bones before my head caught up. I should have trusted my bones sooner. "You trusted them enough," I said. "You said something to somebody." That was enough to start it moving. It took a general's memory to finish it, though. "Most true things need more than one person willing to notice," I said. "You noticed first." He confirmed it. "Neither one of you gets to claim the whole credit, and neither one of you should try to." He laughed at that, a real laugh. He told me about his own service, 3 tours, a knee that still ached before storms rolled through the valley, a wife of 41 years who'd finally convinced him to slow down enough to enjoy reunions instead of treating them like duty stations. We talked another hour, past our second cups of coffee, about nothing in particular and everything that mattered. The easy conversation of two people who recognize in each other a shared fluency in a language most of the world has never had to learn. "You know," he said, "near the end, I think about Hensley sometimes too. Wonder if he ever really understood what he almost got away with, and what it cost him that he didn't." "I think he's starting to," I said, thinking of a gas station off the interstate and a young man twisting his hands in his pockets. Starting isn't finishing, but it's not nothing either. Priya finished her first year in the management trainee program that following spring. She called me the night she got her acceptance letter, so excited she could barely get the words out straight. "I wanted you to be the first person I told," she said, "after my mom. You were the second call." "I'm honored to be your second call," I told her. And I was. She still asks me questions sometimes about the army, about the years before the hotel, a little more than she used to, though I still keep most of it close, the way I always have. But I told her once, on a slow afternoon in the linen closet where so much of this story had quietly unfolded, a little more than I'd told anyone in years. "There's a night I still think about," I said, "more than any other. We'd lost radio contact with part of our convoy for almost 11 minutes. That doesn't sound like a long time until you've lived through 11 minutes like that. When we found them, the truck was jackknifed and burning at one end. There were 2 young men trapped in the cab who couldn't get free on their own. I looked at a stack of folded towels a long moment before I kept going. "I want you to understand something, Priya. I didn't do anything special that night. I did the only thing that made sense, given where I was standing and what I was capable of. Heroism is a word other people give you afterward, for a decision that felt, in the moment, like the only decision available." "That's not how General Briggs told it," she said quietly. "General Briggs wasn't standing in the smoke that night," I said. "He read a report about it years later at a comfortable desk, in a life the men who write those reports usually deserve to have. That's not a criticism of him. It's just the truth of how these things get remembered. Secondhand, at a distance, dressed up a little cleaner than they actually felt at the time." She was quiet a moment, absorbing that. "Do you ever think about the 2 men? The ones you pulled out?" "Every year, on the date," I said. "One of them sends me a card. Still, every single year, from a small town in Ohio where he raises cattle now, and has 4 grandchildren I've watched grow up in photographs. The other one, I lost track of years ago. Some nights that bothers me more than anything else this whole story ever gave me. I folded the last towel and set it on the stack. You carry both kinds of ending in this life. The ones that write you a card every year, and the ones you never hear from again. You learn to hold both without letting either one own you completely. General Briggs wrote to me for the first time about 6 weeks after the banquet. A short, careful letter in handwriting that reminded me, in its economy, if not its content, a little of Michael's. He told me the Army had opened a review, prompted by his own inquiry, into how many other decorated veterans might be working unrecognized in civilian jobs within a 50-mile radius of major military reunion sites. A small, quiet project he said he intended to keep working on for as long as his health allowed. He told me Craig Hensley's name had come up, unprompted, in a conversation with a hospitality industry contact who was considering him for a position at another property. When asked directly for a reference, he had told the truth plainly and let the outcome fall where it fell. I wrote him back. I told him about Maria's CNA program and Ronnie's promotion and Priya's acceptance letter. I understood, better than most people might, that a soldier like Walter Briggs measures the success of any single battle by what grew in the ground afterward, not by the battle itself. He wrote back a second time, a shorter note, just a few lines. I have signed a great many citations in my career, Master Sergeant. I have shaken a great many hands and given a great many speeches about sacrifice and service. I want you to know that walking through that lobby and finding you there, still doing honest work with your whole heart after everyone else in the building forgot to ask who you were, was the proudest moment of my professional life. Rank has a way of making a man forget what he's actually defending. You reminded me. Thank you. I keep that letter with Michael's in the same drawer, though not in the same pocket. Some things belong against the heart every day. Others belong somewhere safe, taken out and read only when you need reminding of what a life spent quietly can still add up to. In the end, if you're patient enough to let the truth catch up with the work. Craig Hensley, I learned later through the hotel's quiet grapevine, did not find another management position easily. Word travels in an industry built on reputation. The story of the manager who fired a decorated combat veteran the day before a 4-star general arrived to honor her had, predictably, traveled further and faster than he could outrun. I heard, eventually, that he took a position managing a smaller property 2 states away, an entry-level role well beneath the one he'd lost. I found I did not feel the satisfaction in that news I might have expected to feel. Mostly, I felt the tired, complicated pity you feel for a young man who mistook cruelty for competence and paid the actual cost of that mistake only once it was already too late to matter to the person he'd hurt. I saw him one more time, unexpectedly, at a gas station off the interstate nearly a year later. He recognized me before I recognized him. He came over, hesitant, hands in his pockets like a boy expecting to be scolded. "Ms. Vance," he said, "I've thought about that morning more than you'd probably believe." "I believe you," I said, and I did. "I learned Maria Delgado's name," he said, quiet, like it mattered to him that I know it, "before I left. I made sure her pay was corrected before I ever left that building. It wasn't enough. I know it wasn't enough, but I wanted you to know I did it. That's a start," I told him. "It's not the whole bill, but it's a start, and most men never even manage that much." He nodded. There was something almost grateful in his face, the particular gratitude of a person who has been given permission to keep trying without being told he's already forgiven. I still work the overnight shift at the Ashworth Grand Hotel. 3 in the morning is still my favorite hour. The marble still throws the chandelier's light back clean once I've finished with it. The brass elevator doors still need that half-inch lift. Nobody but me ever learned to give them. The Army Reunion Association still books that ballroom twice a year. General Walter Briggs still writes to me, twice a year himself, a short letter each time. The correspondence of two people who found unexpectedly that 31 years and one hotel lobby were not so far apart after all. I keep Michael's letter in the same pocket against my chest, along with the citation, folded soft as cloth now from all the years of careful handling. I do not need either one to remind me who I am. I carry them anyway, the way you carry the people and the truths that made you. Not because you've forgotten them, because some things are meant to stay close to the heart for as long as the heart keeps beating. Some nights, buffing that marble floor alone under the chandelier at 3 in the morning, I think about a 34-year-old man who once told me I was the kind of employee this hotel didn't need anymore. I think about how wrong a person can be about exactly the thing they're most certain of, and how long it can take the truth to walk through the front door and stand at attention in the one place that finally lets it. I ran into Colonel Hollis's account of that day one more time, secondhand, through Priya. He'd told the story at a veterans' breakfast in town, and by the time it circled back to me, it had grown a little in the telling, the way stories do. I didn't correct it. Some stories earn the right to grow. Last week, on a quiet Tuesday, I taught the new hire, a nervous young man named Dylan, fresh out of high school, how to free that same banquet hall door with 2 fingers under the release bar. He looked at me the way Marcus once had, confused and a little amazed. "How'd you learn that?" he asked. "You spend 11 years paying attention to a building," I said, "and it starts telling you its secrets whether you ask for them or not." He laughed, the easy laugh of a boy who has not yet learned how much a building or a life can hold underneath its surface. I let him laugh. Some lessons only land once you've lived long enough to need them. Marcus is a shift supervisor now, on the day crew. He still stops to ask me questions sometimes, technical ones mostly. Which valve controls which line? Which panel trips first when the power flickers in a storm? I answer every one of them plainly. I have come to understand something in the years since that lobby went silent for a 4-star general. The things I know matter less for what they once earned me, and more for what they can still teach the people coming up behind me. Sometimes he brings his own toolbox now, a battered gray one his father passed down, and he sets it beside mine on the service cart without asking, the way you set your things beside a friend's without needing permission. We work in comfortable quiet most mornings, 2 people who understand a building the same way, from the inside out, from the pipes and hinges up, rather than from the lobby furniture down. The Army Reunion Association still books the Ashworth Grands Ballroom every spring and fall. I still request those shifts on purpose, though now I no longer stand at the edges pretending I have no reason to be near it. 2 springs ago, Patricia Alvarez asked whether I would be willing to speak for 10 minutes at the fall banquet. A short remembrance, nothing formal, just a few words from someone the room had come, by then, to know. I said yes before I'd fully thought it through, the way you sometimes say yes to the things that matter most. I stood at that same podium General Briggs had once stood behind. I looked out at 200 faces in dress blues and evening wear. I did not talk about medals or citations or salutes. I talked about a jackknifed truck and 11 minutes of silence on a bad radio, about 2 men whose names I still say out loud every year on the date, whether anyone is listening or not. I talked about Michael, briefly, the only time I have ever spoken his name from that podium, and about a letter he wrote me with a shaking hand that told me rank doesn't come off with the uniform. I did not cry, standing up there. I had done my crying already, in private, in the years it took me to be ready to say any of it out loud to a room full of strangers. But I watched a few of them cry instead, quietly. The particular tears of people who understand exactly what I was describing because they have carried some version of the same weight themselves. Afterward, an old woman in a wheelchair near the back of the room, a gold star pin catching the light on her lapel, wheeled herself slowly toward me through the crowd. I recognized her before she'd said a word. "I asked your name once, in this very lobby, a long time ago," she said. "I'm glad I finally know what to do with it." "You asked the right question at the right time, ma'am," I told her. "That's more than most people manage." She patted my hand and rolled on toward the reception. I stood there a moment longer under the chandelier, thinking about how many small, ordinary kindnesses it had taken, strung end to end across 2 impossible days, to bring the truth walking back through those front doors. Sophie, my sister's granddaughter, asked me last Thanksgiving whether I regretted keeping quiet for so long, whether I wished I had told people sooner who I used to be, worn the truth a little louder, a little earlier, so a man like Craig Hensley would never have had the chance to make the mistake he made. I thought about that question a long while before I answered her, turning it over the careful way I turn over most things that matter. "No," I told her finally. "I don't regret the quiet. The quiet was mine. I earned every year of it, same as I earned everything that came before it. What I regret, if I regret anything, is that it took a coffee stain and a cruel young man and a chandelier lobby in Roanoke, Virginia, to remind this whole country that quiet and worthless were never the same thing. Not once, not ever." I patted the pocket over my heart, out of the old habit that has never once left me. But I suppose some lessons only land the hard way. I've made my peace with that. I made my peace with harder things than that, a long time ago, in a place this world will never fully understand. She nodded, the way the young do when they've been given more truth than they quite know what to do with yet. I let her sit with it, the way somebody once let me sit with harder truths of my own. I still work the overnight shift. I still love the hour before dawn best. The marble catching the chandelier's light, thrown back clean across a floor I have polished more mornings than I can count. I checked the pocket over my heart one more time before I locked up that night. The citation was there. The letter was there. Both still soft, still warm from being carried so close for so long. I turned the key in the old brass lock that still sticks a little in cold weather, the one only I seem to remember how to jiggle just right. I stepped out into the dark parking lot, where the Roanoke star glowed faint on the mountain above the tree line, steady and quiet, unbothered by anything that happens down here in the valley. I switch off the chandelier before I lock that door. Every single night.